Good evening. I don't like being the bearer of bad news, but everyone was saying last year was a pretty rough year for small, medium enterprises, and all the signs are pointing to the fact that this year is going to be just as rough, if not even worse. That's why we thought we'd get out of Graham McGregor, who's the CEO of Bold Context, just to have a chat with us about how to recession-proof your business, your small business, for want of a better word. Evening. What am I saying? Morning. I'm not even with myself. Graham, what do you guys do in general terms?
Okay, Jeremy, thanks for having me. I think what we do as Bold Context first is that we, in essence, offering large company systems to small businesses. Historically, small businesses have only had access to cheap systems. So we are offering what large companies have access to from a reporting and management and control perspective.
Like what?
Like process flows built into systems where limits of authority are put in.
What is a process flow, please?
A process flow allows responsibility to be delegated to other individuals. Typically in smaller businesses, the owner is the person who signs everything, does everything.
Right.
So by delegating, you can actually get greater efficiency and get more out of your people.
Okay, so you would then come in and say, right, in terms of a properly managed process flow, you, Mr. Mansfield, who run Mansfield Inc., should actually be saying to your finance guy, you can sign up to this limit or whatever.
100%. And I think the other side of it then is to make sure that...
I know your job already.
It's easy, it's that easy.
Yesterday.
I think one of the things that we also focus on is that a business wants to capture information and record information at the right amount of detail to be able to support effective decision making. Without that detail, how do you make a decision? So which division's making money? Which product's actually making you money?
Okay.
So that's the basis of what we do.
It's just finding out more about your own business.
Absolutely.
Okay, to run it more efficiently, really.
Correct.
Okay, now that we got that out the way, what should Mansfield Inc. be doing right now to protect itself against... Okay. Would you agree with me that you think this year is going to be a bit rougher than last year?
I think it's going to be a lot rougher.
Yeah, and I think next year may also be just as rough. I think we don't know where we're headed yet.
2 to 3 still to get out at a minimum.
Okay. So what should we be doing now if you have a small business, a medium enterprise?
Well, I think the best piece of advice that I've ever come across was in relation to startup businesses. And it was from a serial entrepreneur in the US who said, a small business or a startup business should focus on one metric that has the largest possible impact on their business.
What's a metric?
Well, one driver, one business success factor, key performance indicator. It's just that it's the ability to prioritize. Where are you putting all your effort?
So it's the 80-20 principle once again.
100%.
So if you've got one product that is doing 80% of your turnover, concentrate on that product and stop worrying about the other 5 that are only doing 20%.
Absolutely. So now the key becomes identifying which is that driver that gives you the biggest possible impact. So that's where the skill resides.
Yeah, okay. And that can be anything from a product to a personality to
anything.
A persona. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think the key, if you look at return on investment for investors, if I put £1 in the business, I want something back for that £1. And if I look at cash flow, which is obviously the driver, and it's going to become more important going forward, there are a couple of categories of expenses, assets, etc., that you'd want to watch. First is profit after tax, obviously. Right. Without profit, you don't really have a business. And then the rest is around capex investment. How much are you investing? Where are you investing? Assets, working capital, debtors, inventory, and then how fast or how slowly you're paying your creditors. Now, if you look at those 5 things, if you break them down...
Just go through them again. So
okay.
You've got them.
All right. So the first is profit after tax.
Yeah.
All right. Which is made up of revenue and cost.
Mm-hmm.
So if you start looking in there, which one has a bigger impact for you? Which one can you move? Can you move revenue? Can you focus on new business? Or are you going to focus on existing markets?
Right.
All right. You can expand your product offering. You're going to cross-sell into your existing customers. So you can start breaking that down to identify which one impacts your business the most. And it differs.
Okay.
Then there's the cost side, where there's core expenses and non-core. Now, most guys think in a recessionary environment, cut costs as fast as possible.
But if you cut core costs, you're going to be...
You're in a lot of trouble.
Okay.
Okay.
But so you need to identify the core and the non-core and try and cut the non-core.
Exactly. Exactly.
Okay.
The non-productive costs,
right.
Almost the support area more.
Okay.
Okay.
But don't cut the core costs.
Don't cut the core. It'll decrease your competitive advantage. Your competitors will get a head start on you for when the economy does turn. Your product quality will probably suffer, your service quality might suffer, and as a result of that, your revenue starts to suffer.
Okay, right.
Okay, so those are very
one.
linked there. Okay, then the next side is CapEx.
Yeah.
Again, it's also linked to core and non-core.
Okay.
You want to invest in capital equipment that improves your revenue earning ability, not fixed assets that are just there and nice to haves. A new server with extra capacity, does it add revenue? If it doesn't add revenue, defer it for now.
Okay.
Okay. The next area you start looking at is your debtors control, your inventory. You obviously want to manage those and keep them as low as possible.
Mm-hmm.
And then creditors, you want to keep it as high as possible without making enemies of your key suppliers.
So really what you're saying, or what I'm hearing you saying here, is that every key decision that's made across those 5 categories should be aimed at one thing.
Yes.
Revenue.
Yes. For a small business, it's normally revenue, because normally there's insufficient revenue to carry the costs. All right. And I think where it comes about is in the non-core cost element. It's something that kind of sneaks up over time. When times were good, people have added extra services, used extra consultants, and then they've just kind of forgotten about them and are not looking at them anymore. So now that it's time to recession-proof, it's the ability to see those quickly and execute quickly, make the decision. And typically small business owners are very optimistic people. They want to think positive. It will turn. That big customer will come. And they like to think it's going to happen now. So I think once you've identified it, make the decision as if it's not going to happen.
Should we be thinking in almost a negative, putting ourselves in a sort of negative mindset for a while, just to... I understand what you're saying about, by their nature, small business owners are entrepreneurs, so
Yes.
they do.
They've got to be optimistic.
They've got to be optimistic. They've got to be positive about what they're doing.
Yes, absolutely.
But how do you change
I think it's
that?
I think it's to differentiate what makes you money and what is extra. So be pessimistic and be conservative in the stuff that doesn't make you money. And then be optimistic in the space where you know if I spend R1 making that widget, I can sell it for R2. Be as optimistic as possible in that space.
I hate to admit it, but I think you're almost saying here that if you own a small, medium enterprise, what you should be doing is getting your wife to run it at this stage, because
Absolutely.
that's almost, without generalizing, that
Yes.
is the way that women do think.
Yes. So
Please don't let's not start a whole fight here. It's just 2 guys having a beer together chatting, okay? But that is the right sort of mindset you need in business right now.
absolutely. So, but it's to make sure that you compartmentalize correctly and have identified that one thing that you need to focus on, and then convert it into a common language that your whole business understands.
Okay, but then the next thing is Mansfield Inc. Mansfield sits down and works out all of these things and comes up with a plan. How do you then convince your staff? How do you bring them on board? Because in my opinion, what you're saying means that they are going to suffer a little bit here as well. Because non-course expenditure, to me, would be the sort of stuff that makes the office lacquer.
It's the personality
It's
sometimes.
2-ply toilet paper as opposed to 1-ply. You know what I mean?
Agreed. Agreed. It's a difficult sell, but I think if people understand the big picture, all right, they'd rather know that the business is taking all measures or precautions necessary to avoid job cuts. Job cuts should be the last resort. As soon as job cuts get put on the table, the whole atmosphere in the office changes.
Okay, I know you're not a psychologist, but in your opinion and in your experience working in this environment, how prepared are people in a small business? How prepared are they to put their shoulders to the wheel like the owner does? Because they don't own the business.
I think it's a valid question. Yeah.
Realistically, they're not ever going to own the business. It will always be
They're
the
family
owners.
businesses typically. Yeah. I think it's a very good question. I think there's a slight difference there. In large companies, it's way more impersonal, and large companies incentivize through money.
Yeah.
In small businesses, often people are there because they love what they do, and they're making that conscious decision not to work at a large entity. They'd rather work at something that's more personable, feels more like a family. And so if they're aware of the big picture, they normally react quite positively to it, in my experience.
I know we're talking about small businesses here, but let's take a look at a big business, which is still technically family owned. If you look at something like a Pick and Pay, for example.
Yes.
Do they have the same sort of problems as the small business, being a family owned business?
I think a little bit less so. They've got quite established systems, processes, structures, and they tend to make decisions on a way more impersonal basis. Because the organization's so large, if there's a cost-cutting exercise necessary, it's really a rands and cents decision. In a small business, the owner knows every single employee and probably their family members.
Yeah.
So the direct consequence of any decision weighs on them.
Okay, let's then move away from this whole, because we're getting all psychological and like about the whole thing. Yeah. What are the other steps that we need to be taking right now going into this period?
I think other than the financial side and identifying it, it's to really go back to basics. What do you do well? Have you spoken to your suppliers? Have you asked them for what their market's going to do in terms of material prices, product prices? Understand the supply chain. It's not always about what you're selling to your customer. It's sometimes about what your supplier is selling to you and what's available. So once you've started with your suppliers, speak to your employees. I think oftentimes businesses ignore their employees. You know, the social networking craze that's begun. Often employees can reference new business, but they need to know what you're selling and where you're trying to go. Referrals are an incredibly powerful source of new business. And I think in this time, new business is going to be one of the fundamental differentiators. How well do you capture that market? We're
looking at recession-proofing your small, medium enterprise at this stage of the year, because the year is looking like it's going to be a little bleak, and Graham agrees with us. We'll continue on the subject in just a moment. Don't go anywhere.